BRONXNET. Your voice, your views, your vision.
The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BRONXNET or the program underwriters.
Good evening. My name is Brian Puertas. I am 25 years old, and I'm here to talk to you about young people. Young people, like myself, are worried about finding our place in a troubled economy, an uncertain time, and a broken government. We see problems everywhere that can be solved, but instead we get Band-Aid measures and gridlock. We see politicians more concerned with the interests of their party than the interests of the people they've been elected to serve, even to the point of not doing their jobs. What kind of message is that supposed to send to us? So young people like myself see this and increasingly reject politics as usual. We have become more and more independent, not out of a sense of childish rebellion, but an intuitive understanding that the Democratic and Republican parties do not speak for us. Young people like myself look at each issue on its own, not as part of an overreaching ideology. And young people like myself vote for people, not parties. But what are we told here in New York City? That we should just get out and vote in November for candidates that we don't believe in, that we had no part in nominating, and are not responsive to our needs. If we go to vote in primaries, we're told that we're not wanted unless we join their party. We're denied the right to vote, even though we pay for the primary elections. This is taxation without representation. We fought a war over this. What kind of message does that send? It doesn't have to be this way, though. We can have one primary election where everyone runs, regardless of what party they are. Everyone gets to vote for whoever they like, for the person, not the party, and the top two vote getters go on to the November election. The party machines can still support whoever they like, but they don't get to tell us, the voters, who we can and cannot vote for. We can give everyone an equal voice in nominating candidates we believe in. We can send the message that we want all voters to be a part of all rounds of voting. And we can tell our young people that we want them to be a part of a fair and democratic future in this city. So that's why young people, like myself, ask for you to put nonpartisan municipal elections on the ballot this November. Thank you.
Good evening. Dear esteemed commissioners, thank you for considering my testimony tonight. My name is Jennifer Herrera Andújar. I am a statistic of New York City's education system. I am a high school dropout. I am a GED recipient at the adult literacies at the Literacy for Adults in CUNY, and I'm also a Lehman College graduate. I would like to take this opportunity to testify today on behalf of including the Mayor's Office of Adult Education into the city charter as a person who has benefited greatly from the initiatives and support of this office. I had the opportunity to be an intern at the Mayor's Office of Adult Education, and I have seen on a systemic level the impact that is having not only in the Bronx, but also in all the boroughs of New York City. At a large percentage of the city's adult residents have limited literacy skills, either because of lack of English comprehension or low educational attainment. The future of the city's growth and productivity will be hindered by the many residents who are unable to maximize their capacities, be it in the workplace, by getting and keeping a steady employment that require literacy skills and specific job skills, or within the civic sphere, by not being able to understand public health announcements and important city service information, or in the justice system by not being able to effectively serve on juries and falling into recidivism. I'd like to offer you some key facts that impact the the impact of low literacy and educational attainment has. Achievement gap based on parents' education is bigger than Black, white, or Hispanic white achievement gaps. Inmates who earn a GED in jail are much less likely to be rearrested after they're released into the community. People with limited literacy skills have worse health outcomes and earlier mortality rates than people with higher levels of literacy. And New York City rates are driven by lack of English proficiency and low educational attainment. Currently, the adult education system is not a unified one. It is the collection of services run by the City University of New York, the Human Resources Administration, the Department of Education, the libraries, and the community-based organizations contracted by the Department of Youth and Community Development. These programs are doing an excellent job of serving approximately 70,000 adults. However, we have 2.1 million New Yorkers who need adult education. With a unified system, we can serve more New Yorkers with better results. We can better prepare students for job training in sectors with career ladders, help students transition to college after earning a GED and completing English language proficiency courses, and above all, I think leveraging the potential of the many thousands of adult education alumni such as myself. In what we've seen at Future Now, which is where I work as the leadership coordinator, it's a big impact on what's happening, and the partnerships that the Mayor's Office of Adult Education has created with a lot of the programs within the city has had a huge impact. In closing, being a child of immigrants from the Dominican Republic and a GED recipient, I know firsthand one of the true democratizing forces in our society is adult education. In this city, you can come from prison, you can come from illiteracy, you can come from not speaking the language, and you can get an education. So please consider my proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chancellor Goldstein, members of the Charter Revision Commission, good evening and welcome to the Bronx. My name is Bob Nolan, and I served the people of the Bronx under 3 borough presidents for 30 years, retiring in November of 2008. I directed the Office of Economic Development, spent 4 years reviewing and recommending various Board of Estimate contract recommendations, and was appointed Budget Director, a position I held under Borough Presidents Ferrer and Carrion. During those years, I was a liaison from the Borough President's Office to more than half a dozen community boards across the borough. Although I can comment on many other areas on the Charter, I'm going to confine my remarks this evening to the Office of the Borough President, the Budget, and Community Boards. Briefly, I've lived in Bronx County my entire life. I understand the mindset of my neighbors who say that Manhattan gets everything, and the boroughs are left to share the crumbs. An active, vigorous, fighting borough president is in a position to win concessions from the mayor and the council for important Bronx priorities. The 1961 and 1989 charter change severely reduced the powers of the borough presidents and shifted most of those responsibilities to City Hall and mayoral agencies. Having a friend in City Hall can help any borough. Just ask our friends from Staten Island since 1994, and good for them. We who represent or live in those smaller counties in the city need a little more help in getting what it is that we really need. And the Bronx received major assistance from all levels of government and the private sector in the successful efforts to rebuild our South Bronx. But our government and private sector would not have been successful without the leadership and direction of Borough Presidents Ferrer and Carrion. I urge this Commission to, 1, maintain and expand funding for the Office of the Borough President, expand the powers of the Borough President, Borough Presidents, providing them with a seat on the City Planning Commission, and 3, study the expansion of Borough President authority over schools within the borough. Moving on to the budget. As Budget Director, I recommended capital projects to both Borough Presidents I mentioned earlier, and based on the priorities that they established and ones that I had recommended, many projects that benefited hospitals and schools and City University were funded. I also recommended senior and youth programs and cultural programs for funding. These funds, both capital and expense, were awarded to the Borough Presidents as a result of the charter language providing each BP with 5% of the expanded funding of the mayor in the preliminary and executive budget. I have always believed that the Office of Management and Budget correctly awarded capital funds to each borough. But since 1994, the Borough President's expense funding turned from a government decision to a political decision from City Hall. BP youth funds were cut and then restored in 1996, but the administration over the summer on their own went ahead and changed the formula and reduced funding to the Bronx by 50%. So I would ask you to take a look at these issues to expand the funding of the Borough President so that this office can carry out the duties and responsibilities stated in the Charter, and look at the option of not letting OMB, but the Independent Budget Office, determine the 5% amount awarded to the Borough President's Office on the expense side. Finally, I would just like to take another 10 seconds to say to you that I've been a liaison to community boards. They do terrific work. They made excellent recommendations, and I believe that they need to be not only maintained but expanded. I would establish a baseline of funding for every community board in the city. Number two, I would study the expansion of board powers in the areas of land use and budget. And finally, I would review the possibility of providing each board with $250,000 each year in capital funds. I urge this board to take these recommendations seriously and look forward to talking with every member of the commission or their staff who would like to. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Eddie Bautista. I'm Executive Director of the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance. It's a citywide network of community-based organizations across the city that fight against the discriminatory environmental practices and for environmental equity. In the Bronx, three of our members include the Point Community Development Corporation, Nos Quedamos, and Youth Ministries for Peace and Justice. Tonight I want to call attention to two provisions of the charter that were actually initiated in the '89 charter revision. These two provisions, I dare say, were not just sold to New Yorkers, good government groups, civil rights activists, but I believe the Justice Department as well, since the Justice Department has the pre-clearance authority, since 3 of the 5 New York counties are protected by the Voting Rights Act. The two provisions are fair share and 197A. And in particular, I would say fair share reflects a special resonance for the Bronx. The Bronx is 2 of the 59 community boards. 2 of them in the Bronx handle 30% of the city's solid waste. 1 community board in the Bronx handles the sludge for the entire city, and there are a host of other environmental burdens that impact the Bronx, which also suffers from some of the highest childhood asthma rates in the nation. Section 203 of the city charter, of the revised charter of '89, reads as thus: the fair share criteria shall be designed to further the fair distribution among communities of the burdens and benefits associated with city facilities, consistent with community needs for services and efficient and cost-effective delivery of services, and with due regard for the social and economic impacts of such facilities upon the areas surrounding the sites. The fair share criteria were supposed to work in conjunction with Charter Section 204, which is the citywide statement of needs that's supposed to identify all city facilities slated for siting, expansion, or closure, as well as the Atlas of City-Owned Property, which is supposed to map these facilities. However, fair share was gutted by the regulatory rulemaking that followed the 1989 charter revision. As a result, fair share has failed New Yorkers, particularly those in environmentally overburdened communities. The 2010 Commission can restore the broken promise of the 1989 charter revision by some of the following mandates. 1, mandating that city facilities, sightings, expansions, and reductions be properly identified in the annual statement of needs without exception. The post-charter regulatory loophole allows the city to propose any facility siting or expansion whenever it chooses by filing amendments to the statement of needs, making the process meaningless and non-transparent. If the city decides to site a facility after the statement of needs is produced, it should wait for the following year. Secondly, the fair share should include all polluting infrastructure facilities in the Atlas of City-Owned Properties, not just city-owned facilities. And finally, it should include true indicators of burdens, relevant health data, numbers of brownfields, etc. Technology advances since 1989 make indicators readily available and vital in assessing burdens. I'll submit testimony.
Thank you very much.
I'll be presenting testimony on behalf of Manhattan Borough President Scott Stringer. Good evening, Chairman Goldstein and distinguished members of the Charter Revision Commission. For the past month, since March 3rd, when Mayor Bloomberg announced the formation of this commission, I've argued that developing charter amendments for this year's election on November 2nd, 2010 would be a costly mistake. And in recent days, I've been critical of the public notice provided for these hearings. The notice for the Manhattan hearing, 6 days, was far too short, and the effort to call the public's attention to the hearings has been much too quiet. I have voiced these concerns because I believe that New York City is long overdue for the broad civic debate about city government that only a charter revision commission can lead. You hold the power, after a 21-year break, to once again engage New Yorkers in rethinking our municipal constitution. It is time to have that discussion. And tonight you face a choice. Down one path is a broad conversation about the shortcomings of New York City's government and the structural reforms that will help us meet the new challenges we face in the years ahead. Down that path, this commission can show a real determination to learn from New Yorkers about where city government is succeeding, where it is failing, and how it can be improved. Down that path, this commission can determine whether the creation of a new City Department of Food and Markets hold the promise of making New Yorkers healthier, energizing our economy, and improving our urban environment. You can decide if a new Office of Inspection could end the decades of corruption, dysfunction at the Department of Buildings, making New York City a safer place for residents and visitors alike. You can explore whether an independent authority other than the Department of Education, such as the City Planning Department and the Controller, would help us avoid the terrible school overcrowding crisis that is threatening to tear neighborhoods apart all around the city. You can study the long-term value of New York City of transforming community boards into true community planning boards with the resources, the expertise, and the mandate to inject neighborhood voice into the discussion of our city's future. You can consider whether a new independent planning office, mirroring the independent budget office, would tamp down the politics in our development decisions and enhance this vital function of city government. A more serious concern voiced by many of this commission's proposals are placed on the 2011 ballot. To accommodate the broader review, I am recommending the result will be fewer New Yorkers voting on the, I'm recommending the result will be fewer New Yorkers voting on the proposal. People are worried about low voter turnout in a so-called off-year election. Well, here are the facts. Back in 2002 and 2003, charter amendments appeared on the ballot in successive years. Those two elections closely matched the elections we are heading now. In 2002, Democrat Carl McCall challenged incumbent Republican George Pataki in the governor's race. In 2003, the Supreme Court races topped the ballot, not usually the biggest draw for voters. So it may surprise you to learn that a charter amendment in 2003, an off-year election, received more total votes than the charter amendment that accompanied the gubernatorial candidates on the ballot. 494,000 total votes cast for the nonpartisan election in 2003 versus 470,000 total votes cast for the mayoral succession proposal in 2002. I want to emphasize that my call for a comprehensive public debate about city government is not for abstract reasons. It is to take the mayor at his word and to take advantage of the unique opportunity to make a difference in the lives of New Yorkers. Let me remind you that New York City is a city of over 8 million people. How many learned of this hearing? How many saw the hearing notice when it was posted on the commissioner's website? How many will make their voices heard if your outreach is limited to only a few more hearings over the few weeks? No one knows what needs to be improved in the city government better than the people who it's supposed to serve. The Commission stands a far better chance of learning from New Yorkers about where it should focus its attention if it conducts its work over a period of 17 months instead of 5. You have been charged with a great responsibility. This Commission has an opportunity to point the way to a brighter future for New York City. I urge you to face up to that responsibility with the courage and the ambition that it demands. Thank you.
Thank you. Roberto Garcia.
I'm Roberto Garcia, and I serve as the chairman of Bronx Community Board Number 2, which covers Hunts Point, Longwood, and parts of Morrisania here in the Bronx. Contrary to popular belief, community boards in New York City are the most local form of government. Unfortunately, community boards, day after day, are bypassed and are not included in the decision-making process of everyday government. Who better than the residents and the members of a community to work together in a volunteer capacity with the leadership of a district manager and with the input of a borough president and great city council members? Who better than they to make decisions and plan for the future of their communities. Time and time again, community board recommendations on budget requests, land use, and other planning issues are overlooked. Many city agencies, like the New York City Department of Homeless Services, just to name one, currently utilize loopholes in RFPs and non-inclusionary tactics to push the city's agenda and bypass the community's voices. We cannot continue to run the city as a business without considering the people's business. In particular, community boards continue to have concerns with the lack of transparency. Community boards are hurting because of lack of budgetary support, financial support, and we consistently recommend through a process, yearly process, of putting out our requests for capital campaigns and capital funding for our projects in our community boards, and most of them are overlooked and never funded. Another important factor is that we need to preserve the roles of the borough president and the public advocates who work with the community boards and the council members time and time again to preserve this great borough and this great city. Please consider the power and input of community boards and the transparency that this city should continue to demonstrate as we move to the next millennium. Please consider our community's voices and concerns while you prepare your recommendations. Thank you for your time.
Anthony Green.
Hello, everyone. Good evening, and thanks for coming. I have no speech. I'm just going to speak from the heart and present. First of all, I wanted to say that I love technology. It's a little bit off the subject, but it is related. I am a BRONXNET producer. I'm also a long-standing member of the community in the Bronx. And most notably, I'm a proud father of a 6-year-old daughter. And we make use of technology all the time. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because I think that we should continue to develop programs with technology using public access, such as BRONXNET or our local areas, to continue to grow. So please, within the charters, continue to allow access producers or people in the community to create and incorporate the community. And the second area is with fathers and families, first families and fathers. We do have innovative ways that we may be able to use some of the technology that we do have. For instance, I'm developing ideas to bring fathers and families together through virtual visitation centers by somehow creating a center where a family can experience a visitation via online, possibly with 3D animation and graphics and holograms that can bring people in remote places and keep them together. This is going on in the Bronx where, especially within the African American community, that fathers get a bad rap. And I want to be able to do something to keep the families and the fathers together, whether they have been incarcerated, just to be able to see and make contact and ties with their family. They could be overseas serving our country, to keep them together, or whatever situation, just to be able to engage and interact, create some kind of center and resource where we may be able to do that. So basically what I'm asking for is somewhere in the program to have an outlet or a mechanism to be able to have the voices of the community heard and also empower them by giving them the tools necessary via funds to incorporate the technology that we use every day. There are people here that are updating their statuses. They're using Twitter. You mentioned MySpace, Facebook, and different mechanisms that we're able to use. I find out what's going on in the Bronx through the borough president's Facebook. So, you know, I'm not alone, and a lot of younger generations are using these. Continue to do so. You're live streaming. You're doing all the right things. Let's just continue to develop and promote that kind of activity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
My name is Michael Myers. I'm the president of the New York Civil Rights Coalition. I testify at this hearing because I did not have knowledge in advance of the hearing in Manhattan. I only read about it afterwards in the New York Times, notwithstanding that I had sent the commission through its website a request that I be notified of all hearings and public meetings. That website is decidedly unfriendly. It has no telephone number. There is no email address to contact the Commission or its staff. The contact page seems to be in the form of a form that it seems nobody reads immediately, inasmuch as no one ever responded to me to this date. Secondly, I am dismayed that the composition of this commission, it appears overly weighted in the direction of persons with ties to City Hall and/or public officials. That does not give me any confidence in this commission's independence. I do not question any one person's integrity, but I do wonder about the integrity of purpose of a City Charter Review Commission that is so top-heavy with commissioners who are organically connected with, if not appendages, of City Hall and the elected officials' apparatus. The chair is the CEO of a university that is wholly dependent on governmental funding and private philanthropy from the wealthy, some of whom are the friends of New York's wealthiest citizens. Others on this commission serve on governmental bodies, such as the city's Conflict of Interest Board, or fall under the command influence of public officials. Two of you serve on the Civilian Complaint Review Board, a mayoral agency. Others may be dependent on governmental funding for their not-for-profits and on good government relations, which is the portfolio of the Vice President for Governmental Relations of Con Edison. I suggest that each member of this commission state for the record his or her ties and funding connections to government or governmental officials and/or the Carnegie Corporation. As I was trying to get information about the commission's schedule of hearings and meetings, I saw no announcement on its website of job openings. Yet, I also read in the New York Times that there have been staff appointments made, including that of spokesman for the Charter Review Commission, the very same person who serves as spokesperson for the City University of New York. I have no idea whether that presents a technical or other conflict of interest, but any appointment of staff without notice on its website and without due consideration to EEO principles and without due consideration to affirmative action processes seem to be, to me, like a violation of the spirit of equal opportunity and accountability. It feeds the appearance and the stench of cronyism, the same sort of stench that we smelled when we read in the press that recently departed commissioners of Mr. Bloomberg landed plum high-paying jobs within, the City University of New York. Finally, I am not convinced that another City Charter Review Commission is at all necessary, unless its single purpose is to propose a correction of the politically wired and outrageous change in the city charter that was orchestrated by Mayor Bloomberg and his allies in the New York City Council, who, breaking their promises to the voters, on their own changed term limits law from 2 to 3 successive terms in order to allow Mayor Bloomberg to be eligible to run for a 3rd successive term and to allow Christine Quinn and the other personally affected term-limited city council members like Oliver Coppell to be eligible to run for a 3rd successive term. 2 terms are enough. 2 4-year terms are quite enough for all of them. This commission is operating in a climate of enormous distrust and disrespect for the people, and we and other people look at this process as suspicious. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, and I'm going to find out what happened at CUNY in terms of filling those plum jobs with the mayor's cronies.